summary of Pentecost and the Holy Spirit coming upon us, emboldening the first disciples or apostles, birthing the early church, giving them an authority, but not a power over authority as much as authority to see, recognize, and name God's presence in our midst. Recently I was at a wedding where I officiated the wedding, and I was working with the couple for months beforehand, and the woman was a faithful Christian, and the man had kind of grown up in the church but had walked away and was struggling and saw himself more as an agnostic, where he, maybe God is real, but I've never really experienced God in a way that makes me think God is really alive and vibrantly present. And so when I was doing the sermon in the wedding, I used that authority of the Spirit and simply went to one of my favorite passages in 1 John, where it talks about the essence of God is love, and it says, those who know love in part know God. And named for them that your love for each other wouldn't be there if God wasn't there. That God is somehow a part of that, and in the very fact that you can love each other, you're experiencing God. And more than that, that love, what it does is it draws us out of ourselves toward others. And that as your love grows, it will draw you out of yourself for others and will spill over to not just the two of you growing together in love, but everyone you encounter. And claim that authority of the Holy Spirit in naming the presence of God. That's one way to think about what the Spirit does for us. One way to think about authority. We have passages that deal with authority. Both the passage that Paul talks about is trying to claim authority, and the passage with Jesus has a story of authority. And I want to get at authority because there's different kinds of authority, different ways to think about it. And let me get at authority in another way. Some of you may have seen, this came out, I'm thinking, I don't even remember, it was late 90s, or early 90s or late 80s, but a film called The Hunt for Red October. And it starred Sean Connery and Alec Baldwin. And Sean Connery played a commander of a Russian sub, and it was a brand new prototype sub with a stealth drive that could shift the balance of power. And the commander, due to events in his life, along with his first mate, had decided they wanted to defect and take that sub with and turn it over to the U.S. Well, in filming this movie, Sean Connery was cast as the commander of this submarine. And when he got there for the first day of filming, and they're on the set, and all these actors are playing all the roles of the crew members, and the director's there, and they started filming, because they never film, or, you watch a movie and it tells a story in order, but they never film it in the order it's told. They film all different pieces of parts, all based on sets, when they can access the sets, and all the different effects and things that need to happen. So they started with scenes that were in the sub. And Sean Connery is on the set, and the director starts directing, and Connery is noticing that the different actors who are trying to act like soldiers, Navy people, just weren't responding to him in the way he thought they should be. And he's like, I've got to do something about this. And so partway through the filming the first day, he pulled the director aside when no one saw and gave him a heads up. He said, I'm going to do something, and I need you to just trust me and go with it. So they went back to shooting, and they were shooting a scene, and one of the cast members didn't move and act in the way Connery wanted, and he suddenly just stopped, yells, cut filming, I've had it. You need to hire professional actors, not these inferior actors who do not know what they're doing, who can't follow their cues, who are not professional, who do not understand. And he starts yelling and screaming. He goes right into the director's face and starts chewing them up one side and down the other side and saying, you better get rid of all of these lousy actors by tomorrow, or I am walking and I am off of this film. And just yells and screams to the point where the whole room went dead silent and you could drop a pin and hear it. And as soon as he's done completely exploding, he storms off the set, throwing things, knocking things down, and leaves. So the next day comes around. And everybody's on the set wondering, is Sean Connery going to show up? And he steps onto the set, and all of a sudden everybody's in a position ready to go. Do you get what he did? He realized that this submarine crew needed to be a submarine crew, but it's a bunch of actors, and they're all trying to act like a crew, except that they're all individually sitting there acting. So he terrified them to thinking that he had the power to get every one of them fired. And so the moment he stepped on that second day, everybody responded to him as if he was the captain because they were terrified that they might lose their job. And so the beauty is that he and the director talked about afterwards is from then on, he didn't have to act. He just walked down the set of the submarine, and everybody was at attention, everybody was at their post, and everybody was doing what they were supposed to be doing because they were so afraid that he would have them fired that they responded like a real crew to their captain. And so he was then able to simply be himself because everyone's body language said, this is the captain. And so he created an authority on that set. Not as the captain, but as the prima donna actor who could get you fired. And had them all respond as crew, military crew, who were really responding because I don't want to lose the job. I want to get paid for being on the set with Sean Connery and making the film. That's a different kind of authority. But it's interesting to think about the two different ways of authority. We have another fascinating image in authority here with this interesting story with Jesus. He's in Capernaum. He's not in a Jewish territory, but he's in a territory where there are a lot of Jews. And he's in the city. He just got done talking to fellow Jews when a centurion from that city, a non-Jewish person, a Roman military person who is in charge of part of the region, has their favorite slave, an important slave, who is very sick and incapacitated due to his illness. And the centurion is extremely concerned and is wanting his slave better, if at all possible. And I'm assuming that by his actions, that the medical of the day wasn't able to do anything for that slave. Now again, in that day, slaves were not always in the way we think about slaves, and a lot of people, if you had slaves, would have a slave that would run your household for you and could play very important roles, because sometimes some of the slaves were people who had gotten into a financial jam and put themselves into slavery to pay off debts owed. So how you think about slavery here is not necessarily our American cultural heritage of slavery. And so this slave could have been one of the key people for running the centurion's household. But he's very sick, the man's concerned, he hears about Jesus and senses in the stories he's heard. So whatever they have told him about what this Jesus is doing, and we know from Luke's gospel and the other gospels, that he is teaching people, he is forgiving people, he is healing people, he is blessing people. And in that, the centurion has heard some of that. And so he has said, this person must be, this Jewish person must be blessed by God to be doing what he is doing. And he goes to some of the Jewish elders from the synagogue in that community and asks them on his behalf to go and ask this Jesus to come to him to heal his slave. That's pretty profound to think about that. Here's a non-Jewish Roman military person. These are the dictators who are ruling over lots of different people. He's asking him to go to this Jesus person, a Jewish person, with his own God, to come and heal his servant, his slave. And the elders get to Jesus, and when they get to Jesus, they say, look, this centurion has looked out for us. In fact, he got our synagogue built. Is there any way you could come and heal his slave? And Jesus responds, yeah. And begins traveling with them toward the residence of the centurion. And as they're approaching that centurion, friends of the centurion come out to Jesus on his behalf. And what amazes me is they come out to Jesus on his behalf, and they turn to Jesus, and they say, he doesn't feel that he is worthy of you coming all the way to his house. He asks that you just say the word and heal his slave. And he's a man of authority who, when he tells a soldier to do something, they do it. When he tells a servant to do it, they do it. And he knows you are one of authority too. And he asks that you just say the word, and he will be healed. And Jesus turns away, and he turns to the crowd, and he says to the crowd, I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith. And when the friends got back and the elders got back to the centurion, they found the slave healed and in good health. What an interesting story. What an interesting way to see and think about authority. The story is powerful in a couple of ways for me, because one, you're seeing God present in an outsider. This is a centurion, not a faithful Jew. Not only that God is present, and this centurion is helped in the very building of a synagogue for Jewish people in this community. Then you see Jesus respond to the request and heal the servant of that centurion, who is an outsider. And what's amazing is the first people who came to Jesus to ask for help were the Jewish elders, the leaders in that particular synagogue, who came to Jesus on behalf of this outsider for the help. And Jesus responded. To me, there's a humblingness to this passage, because in it you see God working outside of where we normally think. Does God work outside of the realm of Christians? Yes, God does. Does God work outside of the realm of Jews? Yes, God does. Is God working in the world around us? Yeah, God is. Oftentimes in places we don't always think about. Oftentimes in ways we don't always think about. Through people we don't always expect. And I think why Luke is wanting us to hear this story is not so much to push the authority that Jesus had, but to help us to see where God is present in ways that we oftentimes don't think about. Sometimes we draw too small of pictures of where God is in our life and don't see where God is or how God's working. Just like Sean Connery knew he needed to exercise authority, but could never exercise the authority of being a captain of a submarine. But he could exercise the authority of being a prolific enough actor to affect the employment of other actors that created a response. And he created an ambiance that worked for that film and what he did. Here we have the story of God working outside of the ways we normally think. The Spirit of God moving and touching, and calling us to see where God is in the world around us. Just like when I was participating in that wedding, trying to help that couple see God's presence in ways that they didn't think about, and kept pushing the metaphor of when that love is there. It is a pouring out. Love is not something we keep for ourselves, but it's something we give to others. And even when we love ourselves, it's a stepping out of ourselves to see the good, the bad, and everything, and embrace all of it. Is how we love ourselves. We step out and see and can love. When we love others, we step out for those others. And here you have Jesus stepping out of the expectations of him. You should only be talking to God's chosen people. And is going to heal an outsider. And in fact sees great faith in that outsider. And shows a love for that outsider. And heals that outsider's servant without ever meeting.